Hello and welcome to my new FC25 Manager Career Series. We're going to be using one of EAFC's newest features, the live start points. I have been wanting to start this new series for a while, probably since the beginning of the year, but for one reason or another I just kept putting it off. But finally we're here, and as a result of me waiting so long to get started, I've actually changed from my original plan, which I had been pretty much set on from day one, but we'll get to that in a minute. Let's get started. So when you click on a new manager career, you now have two options. You've got the traditional fresh new season that everyone's known for years, but now you've also got live start points where you can experience the thrill of joining the action in the heart of the football season, whether it's recreating an epic comeback or rewriting history with a championship win. As previously stated, we will be using the live start points, so let me take you back to mid-December 2024. The English Premier League was nearing its halfway point, and there had already been two managers sacked in Erik ten Hag from Manchester United and Steve Cooper from Leicester City. However, after one fateful Saturday in the heart of the festive period, that number was set to double. The morning after a 2-1 defeat to relegation rivals Ipswich, Wolves parted ways with manager Gary O'Neill. They sat second bottom with only 9 points from 16 games, and something needed to change. Now, if I'd started this series when I had originally planned to, this is where we would be jumping in. But since I've taken so long to get started, Wolves seem to have turned their fortunes around and look more than likely like they are going to stay up, all thanks to new manager Vitor Pereira, of course, because all the glory goes to the managers, nothing to do with players at all. Anyway, since Wolves have seemingly escaped the drop in real life, it doesn't feel like the right career to start a series on. So remember how I said that number of sacked managers was set to double? Well, 2 doubled obviously isn't 3, so on the very same day that Gary O'Neill was sacked by Wolves, there was another sacking. Off the back of a 5-0 first half thumping at the hands of Tottenham the night before, Russell Martin was shown the exit door at Southampton. Rock bottom with 5 points from their 16 games, the Saints were praying for a miracle. Ultimately, they didn't get that miracle, as their relegation was confirmed with 7 games to play, which is the earliest a team has ever been officially relegated. But that's why we're here, turning back time to try and rewrite their season. They were still in the Carabao Cup at this point in the season. Only just, the quarter-final with Liverpool awaits, and obviously since Premier League clubs don't join the FA Cup until the 5th round, there is a chance to go on another cup run, but our main focus will of course be avoiding relegation. So let's jump in just after the double sacking and see if we can save Southampton from the drop. In real life they appointed Ivan Juric, but he obviously couldn't save them and has since left the club again after relegation was confirmed. So, since this has the makings of a fairy tale, why not create a new character to take us on this fairy tale journey? The manager name is probably one of the more insignificant details in game, so we're just going to go with that. What were his parents thinking? No one knows his backstory, not even me. We do know he's Scottish though. All the best managers are Scottish, well, except for Russell Martin, I suppose. Anyway, I ended up spending way more time customising his appearance than I had originally planned on doing, so I'll just cut this stuff out. I was basing him loosely off of me, and I thought he looked relatively normal, although his head looks too wee for his body, or his body looks too big for his head. I don't know, still somewhat normal, but then once you see him actually in game on the touchline, he just looks weird, so I really should have just left him in his basic state. But yeah, he's not the suit wearing type, he's the show you how it's done on the training pitch type, you know? Too busy working to bother about looking smart. The shorts wear a bit much though, especially in December. But see what I mean about his head being too small for his body? It just doesn't look right. But enough of that now. On to the settings that actually matter. There's quite a bit more in-depth settings in Manager Career this year, so we'll try and run through them all quickly. Starting with the quick settings, and there's a few new transfer stipulations to choose from. Before, I think the only thing you could really do was disable the first transfer window, but now you can disable transfers completely, so teams never change, out with youth players in retirement. Disabling the first window is still an option, but now there's only transfers, which is an option for anyone who hates the loan system, while only loans is there for people who want to try out other players but not have any moves made permanent. And finally, if you want a challenge for a season or 2, or 14 I guess, you can give yourself a transfer embargo, meaning everyone else can make transfers while you have to live within your means for however long you decide. We're going for a relatively realistic career, so we'll just go with the default active setting. You now have the option to disable scouting and or training plans altogether, if you so desire, but we're leaving them on. I play on Legendary, and financial takeovers have been an option for a while, so we can skip over that as we won't be having one. The board expectations have been adjusted slightly, I believe, so now the options for that are strict, which is kind of middle of the road, but a bit on the stricter side, hence the name. However, you now can go even more strict with the harsh option, or go completely safe with the no sacking option. But just in case you want a little bit of risk thrown in, the lenient option is there too. For match settings, I like 6-minute halves, and for the youth tournaments, a feature we'll look at another time, I usually do 5-minute games, but I think we'll go with the 4 minutes this time just because they do tend to drag on sometimes. You can play with the full potential of the youth players or their current ability. I don't think it matters too much. I do prefer using the full potential simply because the goalkeepers are atrocious. So if you don't use the full potential, you'll probably end up with a cricket score. Now then, this is where it gets a bit more intricate. Simulation settings. The gameplay type options are classic, which would give you the traditional fast-paced feel of a FIFA game, but I have no real interest in that. Simulation is supposed to give you a slower experience, closer to what you might see in a real match. I tried it out, I think it is pretty good. They're definitely onto something, but I do think it still needs a bit of work. But if they get it right, it could be a very good realistic football playing experience. So because it's still not quite right, I use the custom gameplay style to fine tune the settings into what I think works best. The wind and weather can affect the gameplay if you so choose. It's kind of cool playing with these settings on, although it is another thing that needs a bit of work. The wind settings I think are fine, so we'll put that on medium, but the other weather effects do need a bit of work. For example, whenever you play a ground pass in the rain, the ball can get held up as if the pitch is waterlogged, which can happen in real life, but in a league like the Premier League it is very rare. The ball would be far more likely to slide further along the wet surface, so for that reason I feel it's better to just leave the weather settings off. I based my actual simulation settings off of a video by Man, which I'll link in the description, and there should also be a link on screen now if you want a more in-depth look at the new settings. I obviously adjusted them slightly as different people have different preferences, so this is just what I think works best for me. Someone else might try my settings and think it's horrible. Again, it's all about personal preference. So just a few things I'd like to point out. I'd maybe put a bit more error into shots because I feel like there's still too many perfect shots into the corner of the goal, but we'll leave it at 60 for now. Shot and pass speed could maybe be just a bit more, but we'll leave them at 47 and 46 just now as well. Now this is the interesting one. We don't really tend to get as many injuries in game as teams do in real life, so we put injury frequency way up at 86, but we put injury severity way down at 24, so that although players might get injured more often, they shouldn't be out of action for too long. We should still get the odd season ender, but hopefully not more than one per season. I've already said that goalkeepers are atrocious, so they could always use a bit of help. I hate when my defence gives the opposition too much space, and I also think the computer tends to give up too much space as well sometimes, so we put the positioning marking up to 68. Players don't seem to make runs as often as they should, so that goes up to 62 to encourage them on a bit. More and more teams are playing a higher line, but we're not all like Barcelona, so we'll only put it up a little bit. Line length we'll put down quite a bit just to help close up the spaces a bit more. Line width is actually okay at 50, and the modern day fullback is pushing further and further up the pitch, so we'll put that up to 67. Power bar is good at 50, and a poor first touch is actually incredibly common, even at the highest level. That doesn't mean that players are constantly losing possession because of it, but it could mean that someone running onto the ball has to adjust their run slightly because their first touch wasn't the best. So we're going to put the chances of a first touch error up to 74. Now on to the next tab, and the computer specific sliders are to really fine tune your gameplay experience. Man talks in depth about these settings in that video as well, but just a quick summary of it is that the tactical AI behaviour means that the computer will try and work out how to beat you by basically studying how you play. The decision making will differ from team to team based on their style of play, so every match will be different, and it will actually change the way a specific team plays against you when playing them multiple times. The dynamic setting is much the same as tactical, but the changes will be more dramatic when playing the same team, but less so when playing other teams week to week. This is something else I tried and thought was pretty good, but just not there yet. For a few matches it's great, but after a while the sliders just go crazy and the way teams play becomes very strange. I was playing one team in particular, not traditionally known for their possession-based approach to the beautiful game. They just kept passing the ball around the defence. I ended up scoring on the counter-attack a couple times, but they just kept passing it side to side as if they were trying to play out a 0-0 draw. I didn't even need to press them because they just weren't going forward at all. So for a better experience, I suggest these custom settings. Tackle aggression applies more to the slide tackles, which aren't all that common, but it means that when they do slide in, you'll know about it. Even on the counter-attack, the computer can quite often be slow in going forward, so we want them to be a bit more aggressive in attack as well. They sometimes take a while to shoot, so we put that up a little bit more. For teams that play tiki-taka, First time passes are to be expected, but for other teams not so much, so first touch pass frequency goes down. The computer loves getting down the wing but rarely actually put a ball in the box, so we want to increase that a bit. Most teams will try and keep possession these days, but we still want some players to try and take on their man. But that doesn't mean we want to see rainbow flicks every week from players like James Milner, although that would be pretty epic. But anyway, skill move frequency is way down at 25 to help with the realism. Now on to the training settings, and the training plans are how you manage teams' fitness and sharpness levels, so we're leaving that on. We can change how efficient the recovery rates are, but we'll just leave that on default. We could use an automated plan only or go fully manual, but I like having the option of both. At this point, skill games are a bit boring, especially if I'm doing the same ones every week to try and get a few temporary playstyles for a few players, so I just turn the play training drills setting off. And you can now adjust the development rate for players. For a team like Southampton, most senior players aren't going to get much better, so we'll just put the rate of development down to slow, but there's still hope for the youth, so we'll leave that on normal. There are now injury and suspension settings that you can apply to your players, which is pretty cool. It means you can start your season with a couple of injuries or suspensions if you want to give yourself a bit of a challenge, or if someone is injured in real life and you want to keep it as realistic as possible, you can do that too. A good thing about the live start points is that it has the correct data for the date you decide to jump in, so as you can see there's a few players in the Southampton team that were injured in mid-December, but fortunately no one was serving any suspensions. It's also nice that you can still change these settings when jumping into a live start point, because you maybe just want to have a bit of fun starting at a specific point in the season, but a player you want to use is injured. With the settings available, you can remove the injury and play on as normal. We already went over a few of these transfer settings, but there's a bit more in-depth settings to look at. The transfer approach setting can be loose or strict, so that determines how likely a team is to negotiate with you. I almost went with strict because a team that's facing almost certain relegation isn't really likely to attract many players, but I went with loose because I don't want to be left on deadline day without any signings, and it's not like I'll be trying to sign people like Haaland anyway. The transfer negotiations is how difficult the actual negotiations will be, so I just left that on default, meaning it should be pretty balanced. We obviously want scouting on, and you can turn off the search players feature, so you can only scout players further and negotiate with teams for players if they come up in a scouting report for an extra wee challenge, but I'll be leaving it on. And now you can decide how fast your scouts assess certain players. So for star players I've gone with instant, and with general players I've gone with normal. And just some final general settings, starting with the board expectations. We're in a relegation battle here, so the board needs to be strict. There's no time for international duties, we've got enough on our plate, so those offers are turned off. No financial takeover, and this is the English Premier League, so we'll just choose the pound sterling. And should we keep the job come what may, the club should be looking to grow whatever happens come the end of the season, so we'll have growth objectives on. So let's get on with the actual career. The career mode menus have had an overhaul this year, with one of the main features being the social media section. It basically replaces the old news section of the homepage. It's much the same, but the news just comes through in the form of a social media post. It's got a wee random number of fake likes and comments, and you even get to see 3 of the best comments the AI could come up with from 3 randomly generated fans. I get that the world basically runs through social media these days, but this just seems like a needless addition to the game that doesn't actually provide anything useful to the career. But hey ho. Thankfully, EA have updated the menus a couple times since release, as the socials section used to take up about half the screen, but they've reduced the size of it, and now I'd say it's good as it is. Also added in a couple of shortcuts to some more important sections by flicking to the right with the right stick. First is a shortcut to the standings. Our next game is in the Carabao Cup, so it only shows the result from the previous round, but usually a partial section of the league table would be there with the shortcut button taking you to the full table. Then secondly, there is a short list of upcoming fixtures with the shortcut taking you to the calendar, which is good for those who like to see what's coming up and maybe plan ahead if you've got a busy schedule like we do in the 2 weeks that remain of 2024. Something else they changed in one of the updates was this little task list section. It used to be a bit bigger as well, but was reduced slightly in one of those updates, and again I think it's something that looks better now than it did before. And previously, if you had more than 3 tasks, I think you just had to cycle through them, but now if you keep going down, it opens up the full list of tasks, so you can see them all at once and decide what to do first from there, which I'd say is probably a positive change. As for our tasks specifically, we should probably start with the emails, and yeah, I think it's just the introductory stuff, saying welcome and telling us about the scouting system, and then also the board expectations. So if we just take a look at the board expectations, we can see that our critical objective is to avoid relegation, which I think we already knew, to be honest. And if we can get through a couple rounds of the FA Cup, that would be nice too. Now, interestingly, we don't have any other objectives in the other categories, not even the financial one, which has a high priority rating, but I guess that just reinforces how important surviving relegation is. And then our final email is telling us about a rising star in the youth academy, which is pretty cool. They've even given him a wee backstory. Elliot Perkins, a local lad who grew up supporting the club, has outstanding ability and potential to be world class. He understands our culture and values and can be a role model for other players and a hero for our fans. Let's hope so. To the youth academy. So this year in career mode, your club comes with a decent sized youth academy from the get-go, which is the way it should be really, but I think that's mainly just because of the new youth tournaments, as you wouldn't be able to play them if you didn't have enough players. So I'm just going to quickly put all of these lads on training plans off camera and then we can carry on. So the two keepers, Horn and Benzekri, I put on sweeper keeper as that improves positioning, whereas the standard goalkeeper plan would improve handling, and I think positioning is just slightly more important than handling. Both plans improve diving and reflexes, so the positioning was the only deciding factor really. Velasco and Fernandez, the two left backs, are right footed, so I'm changing them to right backs. I'm a traditionalist that way. I don't know what they're teaching in Ecuador, but we don't mess about in defence. Powell, the defensive mid, is only 14, so plenty of time to mould him into a player, but might as well improve his defensive ability to begin with. Paredes completes our Ecuadorian trio and is a right mid that could improve some of his passing stats, and will hopefully be able to turn wee Boateng into a tricky little winger, because being 5'5" at 18, he's unlikely to get any bigger. And then finally, Starboy Perkins has all the potential but plenty of work to do, so the wide playmaker plan should really improve his technical ability. Now back to the task list, and I won't be doing the youth tournament in this episode, but I think we've only got until the end of December to play this specific tournament before it resets, so we will do it soon. I then clicked on the scout report before remembering that I don't really know what positions need strengthening just yet, so decided I'd come back to it. The two players injured is just highlighting players in the first team that are injured and need replaced, because there are a few players out with injuries already, so I figured I'd just sort that a wee bit later on as well. Next up was the training plan, but I couldn't quite remember what my usual plan was, so I had to go out and double check, but this is my tried and tested plan. All out performance if sharpness is lower than 40, and if it's above 40 but lower than 80, then it's just on performance focused. All out energy if fitness is below 80, because honestly fitness is key. Well, it's only on energy focused if it's above 80 but below 90. It's not the end of the world if a player is lacking in sharpness, but if they're lacking in fitness, then that's when you start having issues. So I had a look at the team and sorted out my initial starting 11 and subs off camera. We have got plenty of options up front and at left mid, but we'll be starting with Onuachu up top, just to try and give the defenders a bit of a battle for about 60 minutes of the game, maybe longer, and then once the defenders are tired we can maybe bring on a more mobile striker to try and get a late goal. Cornet seems to be our best option at left mid, but if he doesn't perform well then there's 2 or 3 guys ready to try and take his place off the bench. Now Armstrong is normally a striker, but we can play him at right wing, so with the options already at our disposal up front, we are probably just going to use him as a backup for Dibbling at right mid. Dibbling is only rated 66, but in a poor season for Southampton in real life, Dibbling was probably one of their only bright sparks in the team, so it would be unfair to drop him. Fernandez is the guaranteed starter in midfield. Deciding who his partner should be will take a game or two, but we're going to go with Aribo for now. Ugochukwu could be a more solid option should we need to defend a bit more, but we'll see what happens. Walker Peters is captain, so he's unlikely to be dropped. However, his understudy Sugawara is more than capable of being a regular starter, so Walker Peters will need to perform. Manning is our first choice at left back, but again his backup option Wellington will be knocking on my door if Manning doesn't perform. There are a couple of third choice options for the fullback positions, but I doubt we will ever see Taylor or Bree in action. Lallana is on the bench, but we've also got Smallbone in the reserves should we need him. And also in the reserves we have Wood, who might be required at some point, but we're probably not going to see Amoyo at all. We'd be as well promoting Wee Perkins from the youth academy if we need another option at right mid. Now for the problem area, as you can see, a couple injured players there, Downs and Stevens. Yeah, the problem area is we're playing with 5 at the back, which means 3 centre backs are playing every game, and with just 1 backup option since Stevens is out injured, it's just not an ideal situation. So you can probably guess what kind of business we'll be trying to do in January, and then with Ramsdale in goal, we are in pretty safe hands there. Then there's some youngsters unlikely to get a game, or senior players that quite simply will never play for me, and a couple of other players out injured that could be useful when fit again, but we'll not know until that time comes. So that is basically the state of the team. Now to select the playstyle, and we need to be practical about it. A bit standard is boring and basic and lacks any real vision, so we can't play tiki-taka because the team's just not good enough to do so. Can't really play gegenpress because then we'll leave too many gaps and teams will escape and cut through relatively easily. On the other hand though, we can't just park the bus. We need to be winning games, not trying to grind out draws. So it came down to wing play, kick and rush or counter attack. Now we do play with wingers, but they're not the quickest, and ideally they'll be driving inside to get more bodies in front of goal, so that ruled out wing play. The other two are very similar, but simply because we don't want to play hoofball, we just went with counter attack. Then we had to hire some coaches to help implement the new play style, and the options available weren't great, but we did manage to get one for each section of the pitch, so at least it's a start. I did consider bringing in an expert from a different tactical background, because even though they would be reset to novice for our tactical preset, they would still keep their actual coaching ability, meaning they'd be able to help a lot with the development of players, but any instant boost to players' abilities on the pitch would be minimal, so I decided paying nearly $10,000 a week to a novice just wasn't worth it at the moment. I had to pick a coach or two that would need to do a temporary job in a certain position until we were able to hire more coaches, and then we'll be able to move them to another position more suited to their coaching ability. But until then, this would have to do. And as you can see, even though our attacking coach is only accomplished rather than an expert, they still have reduced the development time for some of the players. So like I said before, it's not great, but at least it's a start. Our final task, aside from the youth tournament, was to review the scouting instructions. As you can see, there were some instructions there already, basically just to look for anyone of a similar quality to the team, or even someone that can be backup, and then a slightly more specific instruction to look for attackers of first team quality. I then added in the instruction to look for centre backs of first team quality below the age of 28, as we want to look for a longer term solution. I did go through that original scout report and asked Goodman to keep scouting a few of them, but none were of any real interest at the moment. Nichols will be scouting in Spain and Larson will be scouting in France, so hopefully they'll both come back soon with a decent list of players. Now I did already have a few players in mind that we could potentially look at, and they were just about every single one of the centre backs from the 3 standout teams in the Championship this year. Starting alphabetically with Burnley, who have plenty to choose from. We started scouting 6 out of the 8 centre backs they have. Egan at 32 isn't a long-term solution, and although Worrell is still only 27, he's previously struggled in the Premier League at Nottingham Forest, so I decided against having a proper look at him. Burnley have been solid at the back this season, so any of their players could probably do a job in the Premier League. Next up is Leeds, and although they haven't been as defensively solid as Burnley, they have still been pretty impressive, and quite a few of the goals they've conceded have been as a result of some dodgy goalkeeping, so I do have an eye on Rodon in particular. I don't really rate Struijk or Vober, to be honest, so I didn't even bother looking at them. And then finally, the playoff bound Sheffield United. Ahmed Odzic is another I'm particularly interested in, and Gilchrist could be one for the future. Robinson is a bit too old, and I wasn't too fussed about Suter, but with him being injured there didn't seem to be much point in scouting him at all, so we decided against that as well. Next up on my agenda was to send the youth scout out on a job. There isn't much point trying to solve first team issues with the youth scout, so there was no real logic behind the instructions I gave him. I just kind of thought it'd be nice to maybe recruit some good technical midfielders, perhaps in the style of Kevin De Bruyne, or if we're being a bit more realistic, then maybe we can find one more like Yuri Tillemans. I'll take either, I'm not overly picky. So he's off to Belgium to look for a centre mid that could have deep lying playmaker, box to box, or even just regular playmaker playstyles. And I like sending them out for 6 months, because 3 just doesn't seem like enough, but 9 feels like far too long, so 6 months is pretty much perfect. I always forget how much stuff there is to do at the start of a new career, and with us jumping in halfway through the season, it means we have very little time to actually make any meaningful changes before the games start coming thick and fast. But anyway, I went through the squad again off camera, this time giving them development plans, and a lot of the team are actually on the same plans as the other players in the same positions, and that's just because a lot of them need to work on the same attributes really. But there's also a few players on the decline as well, so it's about preserving their current ability for as long as possible before they really start losing it. We said earlier about Amuamaya being unlikely to get any game time, so we've put him up for loan, and the same could probably be said for the young striker Dom Ballard, so he has also been loan listed. There are a few players out of contract at the end of the season, and to be honest, we're not likely to renew any of them, except for maybe Walker Peters. If we do end up getting relegated, I'll maybe reconsider, but we're not thinking about that just now. Positive thoughts only. Saying that, Lumley is gone regardless. But I think our pre/mid-season prep is pretty much complete, so we can finally advance a day. But this video has ended up being longer than I had intended, so I think we're going to call it a day. I had hoped to get the quarterfinal with Liverpool in at the end, but I guess we'll just have to tune into the next episode for that. So thank you very much for watching. Bye bye.